Now we're going to talk to Don King, the man who started it all at King Ropes, the patriarch of the King family, and in addition, the collector of the saddles and tack and other memorabilia of the Old West that you find here in the museum that's attached to King Ropes. Don, did you start your life here in Wyoming?
Yes, I was born here, born in Douglas, but I left there when I was 5 years old with my father, and then we traveled, and he was an old-time cowboy and would stay in one place about 2 or 3 months, seasonal work mostly, and I went with him, and mostly in Arizona, California, Montana, Wyoming.
Well, when in these travels all through the West did you stop long enough to begin learning the trade of leatherwork?
Well, I never did stop long enough just to get started. As we would travel, every town that we would come into, I would always go to the saddle shop, first thing I would go to, because the work always fascinated me, and I would just hang out in the saddle shops and keep telling them I was going to learn how to do that someday, and then, but then I was working in Phoenix, Arizona for a riding stable, and was in Porter's, which was a big company, and kept saying that same thing, and one of the boys in there was one of the younger saddle makers. He said, well, get you some scrap leather and some nails and make you some tools and take after it. Well, that was the first encouragement I'd ever had, so it started there. That's the way it started.
After beginning as a leather worker, when did you change over and become a shop owner?
My first shop, I started right after, I started January 1st in 1947, after I had come back out of the service and worked for a local saddle maker here who I had worked for off and on 3 or 4 times before. I had been a carver or a stamper before. I mean, I had never made saddles, but when I came out of the service, I made him promise me that he'd teach me to make saddles. So then I worked for him about a year, decided I was smarter than he was, so tried it on my own. And that was in 47. And then we bought a small acreage out of town, and I'd always worked with horses. Horses was my main thing. The leather work was a sideline, always a hobby. And so after we got the acreage out of town, I couldn't handle the inside work again, so I went back to working horses and then doing this on the side. So I jumped back and forth for 10, 15 years just doing that, working at two local shops and then working at home and trying to make things work out.
Don, do you think of yourself as a businessman or a craftsman or an artist or an entrepreneur?
Well, no, I always thought myself as a craftsman, but I'd worked for enough shops that I had a goal, and I knew, or I thought I knew anyway, what the cowboys wanted, and I thought like them. You know, they're a strange breed, or the old-timers were. The younger ones were a little different, but I kind of knew how they thought, and I figured I did anyway. And so I kind of put it to, and then after you're in it, you have to think of yourself as a businessman, or you better be one to build it up, you know. You've got to, technically not an educated businessman by other people's standards, because we did things a little different.
How has the business that you're running changed in 30 years of operating?
Years ago, there used to be some, I'm talking about craftsmanship now. Years ago, there was some great craftsmen, and then World War II come along and everybody got in a hurry. I mean, it got to be more of a mass production. Meaning, even after World War II, it seemed like everybody was striving for speed. And of course there wasn't, nobody could afford to pay for very much then anyway, so it had to be speed. But now it's coming back to where there's quite a few of them taking pride in their work, and all the crafts are coming back.
So was there a time there when it looked as if the craft was going to die out?
During the Depression, saddle making was a good trade. It paid better than most things. But then, as the unions came on and technical things come on, it stayed the same and everything else advanced.
We're sitting here in a museum that's full of saddles and tack of all vintages and all nationalities. What prompted you to open a museum? This is a fairly recent undertaking.
I had been able to collect a few. I wasn't really a collector because I never had any place to put anything away and couldn't afford it before either. But see, we started our shop across the street in a very small location, and we moved over here and finally got a little bit of room, even some storage space. In fact, I used storage space to start collecting things in the old madam's room upstairs. So I didn't really start collecting until about 10, 15 years ago. See, always before I would take in old saddles on trade, but some of the older ones, real old ones, the only place I had to get rid of them was like a sheepherder saddle or a hunting saddle or something like that. And I never could keep them, didn't have the space, and at that time they weren't really collectible. And but then I got in on the early part of the collecting.
You've pretty much pulled out of the day-to-day running of King Ropes, and you're working here in the museum, but you're also still fashioning tools and doing other things. Why don't you describe a little bit about the change you made in your life in terms of the business?
Well, I kind of got the business to where I wanted it, and it snowballed for about 10, 15 years. It just got growing faster than we could keep up to it. But then we got to a certain stage that the boys were grown and married, and I got to where the pressure was getting to me, and we were getting to be where we had too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Everybody wanted to run it, so I decided to have my shop at home and get back to my craftsmanship.
You say that you're getting back to working in crafts again. What kind of craft work are you doing?
Well, like you say, I'm making saddle making tools or leather working tools that I used to make for myself as I needed them. But then I always wanted to do it as not as a business, but as a hobby more. So I did that as a hobby, and plus I sort of buy and sell leather working machinery and recondition it, working just because I like to. And then I still do some leather work. I still make a saddle now and then and do some carving, and plan on doing quite a bit more. But
do you think that these skills, that this handwork, this ability to tool leather and saddles is going to survive?
I think they're going to get better. They are now, but it's just happened within the last 10 years that they're starting to. What's happened is that they've turned the saddle making and the bit and spur making and the silver work into an art thing, and they're starting to show it more galleries, and they're having special shows on this type of work. And the younger ones are getting interested in it, and they're willing to sacrifice some time and put more time in on their thing, more effort. And it shows on knife makers, engravers, bit and spur makers, saddle makers, woodworkers. It's all, and they all have their art end of it. All of them have their art end of it.
You think that's a trend generally, this new appreciation of art and craft over mass-produced cheapness?
Well, I think we're going to have to compete in the world. I think we lost some of our. We used to be known as some of the best craftsmen in the world, and then I think we lost lost some of that.
And sometimes we seem to be competing to be better mass producers.
Well, I know, but then I think they finally realized that we were losing our craftsmanship by doing that.
Are there younger members of your own family, such as grandchildren, that are getting involved in this trade?
Well, yes, 3 of them worked here this summer. I've got one that's taken up the leather end of it, and one has gone off to cooking school. So I think he's changed his mind, but then one has been playing ball all winter, so he hasn't been around that much. But no, it looks like there's going to be some carry-on.
Good.
But that's up to my boys to keep them going. I've done my share. I've done my part of it.
King Ropes is everything a business isn't supposed to be in the 1990s. It's small, and it intends to stay small. It's family-owned and run, and it intends to stay that way. And it uses highly skilled artisans to produce a product that really couldn't be produced on a factory assembly line. If Don King is right, there's a market for that kind of product, and there are still artisans with the patience to produce it. And there is a home for a business like King Ropes on Main Street, Wyoming. Thanks for joining us.